Hey, Sister Squirrels. It's your favorite neurodivergent duo, Shy and Lex.
Welcome back to Black Girl, Brown Girl, Squirrel.
We want to take a moment to acknowledge there are a variety of people who could describe themselves as neurodivergent, and this can include a diverse list of conditions, disorders, etc.
And while our experiences may specifically relate to autism spectrum disorder, ASD, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, we hope that all our listeners can feel welcome and relate to the shared experience of being neurodivergent in a neurotypical world, because this is our safe space.
Hey, Lex.
Hey, Shy.
All right. So here we are. We're now, in our second month of recording?
Mm-hmm. We on week 2, I think.
Okay. So, how you feeling?
I am less afraid. Look at that.
All right.
In the beginning, I said I was terrified. And now I'm like, nah, it's cool. I'm good.
Cool.
Kind of. For the most part, yeah. How are you feeling?
I'm actually doing pretty good. You know, it's not like I haven't done this before. It was just different talking about something that's so much more personal that I'm still working through and trying to figure out. You know, there's a responsibility I feel of, don't say anything wrong. But the reality is, we're all trying to figure it out. So it is what it is. But I feel really good about it. I feel like I've enjoyed I've listened back to our episodes, not just from the editing process, but just in general. And I'm like, wow, that was some good stuff. Or I was like, we got kind of deep there for a second, and it just, I like the chemistry. I like the connection. I think it's good. I feel like our audience is really going to relate to that. So yeah. I'm excited about where we're going.
Yeah, I'm excited too. And I kind of feel the same way as I started getting into it. I'm like, okay, it's not as daunting as I maybe felt it was before. Learning some things about myself. For anybody listening, yes, I do know that I said and that I coughed so much in like the first 4 or 5 episodes. I was recovering from a cold. My bad. I did my best. Just so you know, I am aware that happened. It is not a surprise to me. Also, I learned, I kind of already knew, I don't fidget a lot unless I'm nervous. And because I was nervous during recording, all the stuff I was touching at my desk was crazy. I was like, what is you doing? Stop messing with the keyboard. So since I know now that that's happening, I could be more aware of it. I'm sitting in a different spot that has less things for me to fidget in the first place.
Well, I told you before we started, I had to put my fidget thing down. I was like, cause it's my favorite toy now. And I'm like, I got to put that down cause it's going to make noise. It'll be popping all over the microphone. I hear you.
Speaking of which, before we get into the topic for today, how you feeling this week? Cause I'll tell you right now, last week for me, I was struggling. The ND, it was jumping out so hard. Last week, it was crazy. I couldn't be bothered to do anything. Everything was overwhelming. At one point, I was sitting somewhere and I was sitting there like, why it smells so weird in here? And then I said, wait a minute. I don't think it smells weird in here. I think I'm a little overstimulated and I'm a little overwhelmed. And suddenly I could smell everything that usually I would not smell.
So when you talk about the ND was ending, okay, so I kind of threw myself into like I don't know what it is, but yeah, ND was bad last week. I was working on a client project, so I was working, and it was like I couldn't work during the day for whatever reason. I kept trying to work during the day, and this would happen, and this would happen, and then we had an issue with our car, and all these things were different happening and popping off. So I would end up working at night, which makes me hyper focused. If I start working at night, I'm going to hyper focus, and that means I'm going to be up till like 4 or 5 o'clock the next morning, and then I'm going to go to bed, and then I'm going to get up at like 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, sometimes 10, but basically a couple hours sleep. So that was my routine from, I don't know, Sunday to Tuesday night. And after that, because I'm preparing for some other things that I'm doing, like my ND was all over the place. I was dropping things like regularly. My mom was like, is World War III happening? And I was like, no, I'm just, I can't hold on to the things. I was tired. I was sleepy. Lex was like, you good? She texted me like, are you good? And I'm like, yeah, no. She's like, okay, what can I do to make the crash a little bit easier for you? I was like, I don't even know at this point. I didn't even respond to you. I didn't respond to you until I saw you. And I was like, by the way. So yeah, it was a little bit rough, but you know that for anybody out there that's listening, it happens. We all know that it happens. It might take one thing. It might be a series of things that just trigger us, because all of a sudden yesterday, I had a flashback to one of my favorite Korean dramas, Extraordinary Attorney Woo,
Mm-hmm.
because she's autistic. She's ASD. But she's got this full life as an attorney. But there is, in one of the first few episodes, she's undercover at this bridal store and she's wearing this beautiful bridal gown and she looks lovely. And they're all asking her, oh, how are you feeling? How do you look? You look so beautiful. And she's like, I feel like it's one giant tag scratching me. And I know that there's like a lot of sensory things. So I know for me, sometimes it's sound and light. And then I'm like, I need a dark room and I need a certain sound, or I need no sound. I had that phase this week. And then everything I was wearing yesterday felt like giant tags on me. Like I was itching. Like everything was itching. My softest sweaters were itching. I was like, yeah, as you can tell right now. And I did take my medicine this morning. The ND is ending. So yeah, here we go. You guys are in for a wild ride today. I don't know what you're going to get out of this episode.
I don't know either. Cause we on this call and your mind was everywhere. And then you said, ooh, did I go to the bathroom yet? I had to go for like hours. Did I go? I can't remember. Did I go? I did go. I went. And then you still went. So I was like, I thought I don't know what's happening. It's okay. We're all doing our best.
I did. So just to give you some context to that statement that Alexis made. So I left the house this morning to go to our place of worship. And I was like, oh, I need to use the bathroom when I get there. But then when I get there, I get to talking and the meeting starts and I'm like, okay, I'll wait. And then pretty soon it was just out of my mind because I was just focused on what we were learning. And then I was like, I need to go. So I got up, I go to the restroom. I actually ran into Lex in the restroom. And that's when I returned the text, but face to face. And I use the restroom. And then I come home and I use the restroom again. Like, you guys really want to know my bladder stuff, but oh well, we're here. It's our safe space. So now it's been a couple of hours since I've seen Lex, and now we're getting on it to start prepping and recording for the show. And I'm going, all of a sudden I realized I have to go to the bathroom again. Well, see, I'm drinking a lot of water. I'm trying to do better drinking water. I had just finished a soda, even though I said I was trying to improve drinking water, but I am trying to improve drinking water. And I was like, And that's when I go, did I go to the bathroom like from all those hours ago? She's looking at me like, you literally forget to go to the bathroom. Yep, that's part of my ND. I will completely focus and forget to do things like going to the restroom, eating real food and not just surviving off of hot tamales and red vines throughout the week. You know, things like that. So.
Oh, man.
So speaking of which, that brings us to today's topic. So we've shared in previous episodes about our individual experience of arriving at the fact that we are neurodivergent, whatever that looks like for us. And so we wanted to talk today and say that there might be some of you out there that are relating to us. Some of you may have sat there and said, well, I can kind of understand this or that, or I've experienced this, but not really that. So the question is, how do we recognize symptoms of neurodivergence? What are some of the signs and the symptoms and shared experiences that we may have? Because memory loss is one thing, but memory loss when you're ND is completely different than just typical memory loss or getting older memory loss. So we wanted to talk about that. And as you can see, we both had interesting. Oh, so since Lex told on me, I'm going to tell on her. Yeah, see, the ND is working. So she texted me the other day and she was like, hey friend, how you doing? She's like, let me tell you how my ND is showing up this week. And I said, how? She goes, Put my pants on backwards, and I left the house and forgot my phone. So then I had to go back to the house and get my phone. And I don't know if your pants were still on backwards at that point, but
they were not. Friday, I feel like, was the peak of the week I had when nothing wasn't going well. I mean, I was at work just like, I ain't got it. I don't have any kind of social battery this week. Someone asked me a dumb question on the phone, and I answered them in a way that was just like, this question was dumb that you just asked me. Like, I wasn't even able to like dial that back a little bit. It was a rough week. And I was getting dressed Friday morning, already struggling, running late anyway. And I kept looking in the mirror like, why are these clothes not looking right? What is going on? And I pulled my shirt up and I said, no. And like, these are like pull on pants. They have like an elastic waistband, but they're like kind of like slacks. So it looks ridiculous to have them on backwards. And I saw it and I said, is Jasmine still here? Because I have to call. I said, Jazz, come look at this. Look at what I did. I put my shirt up. She was like, no, how'd you do that? I said, I don't know, friend. It's a weird day. Get in the car, drive up the street. About to turn my music on. There is no music to be had because the phone is still sitting on top of the mantle in the living room. So I had to turn around and actually need my phone. Like, there's stuff I have to do at work that ties back to my phone. Yes. So I actually have to go back and get it. And I was like, this is not my best week, but it's a week that I'm having. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you can relate to that, or if you've had those moments, then we wanted to talk today, like, in all seriousness, no, though we did want to talk about like some of the signs and the symptoms and things like that, because there are times in a future episode, we'll talk about some of the barriers to getting diagnosed, but there are times when you feel like, I don't understand what's really going on with me. And then you look around and maybe you're getting directed to something else. You might be told it's all in your head, yada, yada, yada. I don't know why I'm saying yada, yada, yada a lot, because I have not watched Seinfeld in umpteen years.
I was about to say, are you now Elaine Bennis? What is happening? I don't think I've even heard you say yada, yada, yada before today.
You know what it was? I was over at our friend's house, and her tone for her text messaging is that Seinfeld tone. And I think that's where it came from, even though one of my favorite Seinfeld episodes is called The Sponge. So let's talk about a couple of things. So I am going to divert the first part of this conversation to Lex, because she has been researching a lot more about neurodivergence longer than I have. I'm only a year or so into this. So from your perspective and some of the research that you've done, Alexis, when it comes to neurodivergence, but specifically ASD, what are some of the common signs and symptoms and things or shared experiences people have had that might drive someone to think that they may possibly be ASD, autistic spectrum?
Okay. So obviously there's a lot of information out there. It all can present kind of differently from person to person, but pulling some of the research I've done, pulling it together, particularly from autismspeaks.org, it kind of laid it out in this way. There are two core symptoms that if you're going to get a diagnosis, this is what that clinician is going to be looking at. Number one, challenges with social communication and interaction, and restricted and repetitive behaviors. So those two things can sound very, very broad and vague. And in a way, it kind of is. But those are like the core things they're looking at. And then they'll go into looking at details to see how does maybe the way that you interact with people, things that you do on your own every day, how does it fit into those categories? And they'll look at the severity of those symptoms.
Okay.
So like signs of autism, usually they'll see it in childhood, but you can probably pick it up at any age. There's a list here: loss of previously acquired speech, babbling, or social skills, avoidance of eye contact, persistent preference for solitude, difficulty understanding other people's feelings, delayed language development, persistent repetition of words or phrases, resistance to minor changes in routine or surroundings, restricted interests, repetitive behaviors such as like flapping, rocking, spinning, things like that, and unusual and intense reactions to sounds, smells, tastes, textures, lights, and or colors, or what most of us will simply say sensory sensitivities.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of different things can fall into those categories, but those are some pretty common examples of the traits that you'll see in someone on the autism spectrum.
Wow. You know, and I know that that sounds like a lot to people and it can be overwhelming. So just keep in mind that as we talk about these different symptoms or experiences and things like that, there again, yes, all of us might experience and things like not wanting to have eye contact. If you have survived trauma, that's one thing I noticed, especially the older I got, the harder it got for me to make eye contact, right? So that's a trauma response. So some things can be related to other things. We're talking about, are these things that are impacting you on a regular daily basis in your life and possibly preventing you from interacting with others the way you see other people interacting with others. So that's what makes a difference when we're neurodivergent, is because we are coming out the world and see things differently. And what's so interesting to me, and we'll go on and finish talking about autism in a second, but what's interesting to me is our therapist, Dr. A, said to me one time, because I asked her, could I be on the autism spectrum? And she goes, well, kind of like technically, everybody's kind of like that's neurodivergent is somewhat on the autism spectrum. Again, it goes back to severity of what you're experiencing and how much are you experiencing, which determines if you're fully in the autism spectrum wheelhouse or if you're just on the neurodivergent spectrum itself. Because I'm sitting here reading this list like, okay, I experienced that and I had experienced that and I felt that, you know. But seriously, is when I started digging into, and that's why I went to her, I was like, okay, so could I be ADHD, which is autism with the other aspects of ADHD? And she's like, not really. She said, the main thing is you don't have challenges with your social interactions and skills and communication. So even though I do have at times repetitive behavior or things that I do that I don't realize is soothing me or whatever. She's like, you're not to the point where we would say, yes, you in fact have autism, because it's not, I hate to use the word severity, but that's basically what it is. It's not at a level where they're like, yeah, this is prohibiting you from being able to do X, Y, and Z. So.
Gotcha. Yeah. And it's interesting too. I am curious as to why you don't want to use the word severity.
I'm very keenly aware that sometimes words that are used from the so-called neurotypical perspective to describe things can also have a negative connotation. So like we say these are signs or symptoms and things like that. I don't feel that neurodivergence, autism, or any aspect in the neurodivergent community warrants using words like, where we call it a disease. So when I think the word severity, honestly, it makes me tie back into when they used to use the R word to describe people who were different.
Okay. Now, I do want to point something out. For the both of us, the conditions that we have come to realize we have, they both have disorder in the name.
Yes, they do.
And so by taking on, as we previously discussed about labels, by being okay with willing to accept that label that includes disorder, in my opinion, it does make sense to make some room for using language like severity and symptoms. If we're arguing that part of what these traits and stuff mean is a hardship in interacting in daily life, I think eliminating some of those other clinical terms and descriptions kind of muddy the water, so to speak, of speaking about the experience from the perspective of being a disorder.
And you know what? I get that, and I accept that. I think part of it too is just like when I years ago became a deaf culture minor in college in deaf studies, when you step into a world that is new to you. You are walking on eggshells and you're very careful about the things that you say and how you say them and that sort of a thing. And I feel like everybody has the right to, as we talked about, identify themselves the way that they choose to identify. I think part of the process of when you step into the neurodivergent community, just like when I stepped into the deaf world, is understanding there are nuances to this. And it takes a while to try to understand what those nuances are, how people feel about communication. There are people to this day that will not use the term Asperger's or Aspies because of it being connected to, back in Nazi Germany. But there are others that said, but this is what I was diagnosed with when I was younger, and I'm going to hold on to this word and reclaim it. It's kind of like the way that I liken it to is in like for the Black community, whether or not you're going to use the N-word. Some people feel very strongly about it. Other people's are like, nope, I'm going to reclaim it. Or there's all these different feelings. So everybody kind of has to work through it and figure out the nuances and where they fall into it. I'm coming into my new community of neurodivergence from an ableist perspective because I didn't know what I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And there were words that were often used, not that and I'm not going to pretend that I never used the R word growing up and all that kind of stuff. But I also recognize that different communities have the right to embrace and say what they prefer to be called and that sort of a thing. I prefer to be called Black.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? When I was born Black. African American wasn't an option. When my mom was born, my mom was Negro. Her parents were colored. So as time changes, wording and what they mean changes, but what we choose to hold on to and identify for ourselves is our choice. So I know that I had ableist thinking and tendencies, and especially when I looked down at one point, I think it was last year sometime, and realized that I had a clinical diagnosis of depression. I've had that clinical diagnosis for years. I didn't realize that made me disabled or qualified me for accommodation because I never felt like I needed accommodation. So now that I know that I'm in the neurodivergent community and I sit and think about, okay, if I had to go back to the workplace, if I didn't own my business and I have to go back to a workplace, what accommodations would I need? Whew. And that was a lot to take in and think about. And I was like, yeah, I can see why I would identify with the ADA situation. So I'm getting to the point where I'm accepting certain words, but I want to make sure I'm not coming at it from an ableist perspective, if that makes sense.
No, I hear you. I certainly hear you. And we've discussed this a bit, and we know that we got some kind of differing thoughts on this in like some of the specifics and in a general sense. Because I'm looking at it like I be feeling some severity with my symptoms sometimes, but but no, in all seriousness, I do understand. Yeah, that severity was on a different level this week. But no, I totally understand that.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, with that severity levels of the traits and symptoms as laid out, they'll usually then sort of place them into categories across levels 1, 2, and 3. And that is more so an indication of how much support do you need to bear with the symptoms that you're having. So when speaking to Dr. A about myself, and she explained to me why Asperger's is not what is used in the DSM anymore for diagnosing individuals, she said what would happen is I'd be a level 1.
Okay.
And when speaking to her about my concerns about would I actually get a diagnosis, like would I be wrong about this, she was like, I'd be really shocked if you don't get at least a level 1 diagnosis. So they look at all the different traits that you might have, and then they can sort of figure out levels from there. And I would imagine these sort of levels and things are helpful when it comes to maybe filling out healthcare paperwork or applying for different accommodations and things like that, having the sort of ways of measuring, which can be hard because it is a spectrum. So technically no one's going to be in the exact same spot because everyone's different, right? But I think for the purpose of giving what you need in the scenario that you're asking for it, I think this is where this comes in handy for clinicians and those maybe having to review submitted paperwork and things like that.
By the way, because you use the term, and I think we've used it before, but I want to define it for those who may not be familiar with what it is. We'll use the term DSM. That's D as in David, S as in Sam, M as in Mary. It's the DSM-5. And what that is called is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM. And it's basically the handbook, the tool that professionals will use to help diagnose. It's primarily used in the United States, but also around the world. But it's primarily a tool that is used as the guide for diagnosing mental health and conditions and mental disorders. So it has in there descriptions of what that disorder is, what the symptoms might be, different criteria for diagnosing. So that's part of what Alexis is referring to as well when she talks about, which level one is on, 1, 2, or 3, when we talk about severity of symptoms. And one way to think about severity, which is how I think about it, is how frequently these symptoms are happening, right? And to what degree. So you might have a symptom every day, but is one symptom more intense? Like, a lot of us joke about being OCD, right? But if your habit of, I have to check the locks on the door 20 times before I can go upstairs, that might be something that you might do occasionally. But if you do it every day, every single time, and forget, that's starting to talk about level of severity. So that's what the DSM helps our clinicians and practitioners to determine exactly where we are when we're talking about neurodivergent. And by the way, total sidebar here. Sorry. Yeah, squirrel moment. I've talked to a couple of mental health workers, and there's a couple that we'll have on the show in the future to interview, because I wanted to know, why was neurodivergence considered a mental health condition? Because, again, coming from ableist thinking, mental health conditions, mental illness, as some people think of mental health. So those are things like dissociative identity disorder, DID. Those are things like depression, anxiety, are considered mental health, bipolarism. So these are also components at times, depending on what you have, of neurodivergence as well. So that's why I was like, I wonder why it's called that. So that'll be a discussion for another day. But I just wanted to put that out there too, in case somebody is wondering, like, well, why is it associated with that? So that's where this diagnosis comes from. So if you hear us refer to the DSM, that's what we're talking about. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes. Nope. I think that was good to to make sure to actually explain what that is. I'm just talking about it, assuming that everybody else know what I'm talking about. Yes. So I guess then, would you like to then know how this list of things, what that had to do with me and why I even was thinking, I might be on the spectrum. So there are some things here that didn't quite apply to me, right? Talking about loss of acquired speech or social skills. I don't think I much lost them or anything like that. I never had any issue with being nonverbal. I don't have any experience with that as a child. In fact, I think I don't remember the word for it, but I was pretty hyperverbal. I could speak very early. I could read very early. All of that good stuff. Avoidance of eye contact. I don't think I knew that wasn't a thing everyone did until I became deep into my teenage years. I was like, oh, you telling me y'all don't all have to think about making sure you look someone in the eye? Like, make sure you do it, but don't do it for too long, because then that gets weird, I think.
Cringy.
Here we go. Make sure you smile and go. Okay. Y'all don't all have to do that? That's crazy. I didn't know that. Difficulty understanding other people's feelings. We've discussed that a lot of times, both here on the show and just in our personal conversation. Yes. I simply don't even know how to do that. When people say, oh, that person's difficult to read, I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? And then when they tell me, I'm like, why would you even do that? Just ask. Like, I definitely can't intuit what other people are feeling. And even if you try to explain to me what you're feeling about something, I still might not get it. I've kind of landed on, if you're important to me and you tell me that this is a thing you feel, it sounds like that's important to you, therefore I care about it. But I don't get it. But that's okay for me. Persistent repetition of words and phrases. My whole adolescence was me just watching TV and then repeating what I heard on TV, either in my head or to other people. And what what would make that get weird sometimes is if you watching old TV shows and then you repeat something you heard on a TV show to somebody that's your peer and they're like, what are you talking about? Because this TV show came out 25 years ago. They don't know what that's not a phrase anyone uses. But I'm like, yeah, this is how people do stuff. Some people say things, they say that. I'm going to say that too.
So, okay. I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at the situation because there's times where I've said stuff like literally the other day I was with a group of women who were older than me. They're literally old enough to be my mom. And I used a phrase that I have heard all my life in my family that I thought they would have known because the term was step and fetch it. I don't know if
What
you've ever
in the
heard
world?
that term. Yeah,
No.
you haven't heard that term. But I wouldn't expect you to necessarily know that term, but I would expect older generations because he was a Black vaudevillian. He was one of the first Black actors and things. And so where we get the phrase like people, particularly Black people, men on TV or in movies, they were shucking and jiving and all of that kind of stuff. It actually originated because those were the types of characters he had to play to break down barriers in Hollywood. So they would say things like, I would kowtow, I would step and fetch it, which means I was willing to do whatever it took. You looking like you don't know what kowtow means either.
No.
You never heard that phrase?
I don't know what that is.
Oh, Lord. Let me... See, this is why I keep my computer up so we can type things in. So kowtow actually means to show excessive subservience or a display of deep respect, historically by kneeling and touching one's forehead to the ground. Or like if you looked at old movies where Blacks were not depicted in the best of light, even one of my favorites, like Gone with the Wind, they're constantly bowing and yes, sir, and no, sir, and yes, sir, master. That's kowtowing. So they would say you were kowtowing or step and fetch it, which is you shucking and jiving and yes, that kind of a thing. And so I say that to say because I was laughing because I'm thinking in your situation, you're using phrases that were older, thinking it was going to relate to the people that you were talking to. And I was in a situation where I was using an older phrase and I literally had to educate these Black women on who this man was because they were like, we don't even know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. So I just did a whole history lesson for them like I just did here. But
it was a sad one too. Anyway.
Yeah. But I'm saying, but I used a phrase that I thought they would relate to and they couldn't. And then I kind of felt like, and I was like, okay, so you do feel kind of off and kind of odd in that way. But what I want to know when you're talking about that you would use those phrases, and it's because it's this persistent repetition of words or phrases, which is called what? Echolalia. I don't even know if I'm saying that word right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the way that I've seen that, again, maybe this goes back to talking about levels, is you would say something and I would instantly repeat what you said. Just repeating it, not repeating it to say something in context. Just like if you would say, there goes a bird, and I go, there goes a bird. That's how I'm used to seeing that particular trait. So yeah. I find it interesting that you were like, I'm going to watch a show. Oh, that's how people relate. So now I'm going to take that phrase and go to school and use it so I too can relate.
Yeah. And it's like twofold, right? Because I want to relate. And then I probably just like the phrase. It just sounded good in my head. So I might have been saying it out loud to myself. I might have just been saying it in my head over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And I said over and over that many times because that's what it feels like in my head. Okay. And then I go use it. And I think in retrospect, I can understand I might have been using these phrases like a lot out loud to kids who were like, what is happening right now? Okay. Maybe more than I might have recognized. Because you know how you can just kind of just be doing stuff and you're just being yourself and you don't really see how much what it looks like on the outside. So I definitely think some of that happened. And a lot of these things, I feel like I did more of it as a kid and I kind of back to masking. If I got enough feedback, like negative feedback that this is like not socially acceptable, I'm like, cool, don't do that anymore. And it might not get past my head. It doesn't come out my mouth.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that because that helps me to better, and I'm sure our listeners too, to better understand like, again, going back to the different levels. At this level, you may or may not be doing it this way. Like you said, it was on repeat in your head, but it may not have always been on repeat coming out your mouth. And then on other times it was. And then there are some where as soon as you say something, they instantly repeat what you say. Because I've experienced that with some of my friends who have autistic children, where you say something and it kind of like instantly repeats. And you're like, and then I'm like, okay, are they checking for understanding? Did I say something wrong or something like that? So again, turning it inward and ableist thinking at that time and that kind of a thing. But just also too, trying to make sure that I'm understanding the person that I'm talking to and they're understanding me. So that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And on that note, when you were like, I was wondering, did I say something wrong? Or they trying to make sure something this? I've recently seen something that was like, that's kind of a bid for connection. Because looking at it from my perspective, if you said something, I just repeated it like that, it probably just sounded good. And I was like, I like that. And then I just said it. It's like, you said a thing I like, and I like you. I'll just say the same thing you said. Now, we know in typical interactions, that is not how people connect, but for the autistic brain, that's kind of like the default kind of thing. Like mimicking, imitation, that sort of thing is usually like that kind of bid for connection in that way. So if someone with autism is copying you like that, they probably like you.
Okay,
like, oh, that was cool.
That does explain a lot about some of my interactions with other folks over the years. Okay. And there's nothing that, and that's the other reason why I appreciate dialogue, is because I'm looking, as we look back over our life and where our neurodivergence may have shown up, because most of us have had it all our lives. It's not like, let's say like bipolarism or schizophrenia, which might show up in the 20s, and a lot of people like in the teen years and the 20s. Neurodivergence pretty much is there your entire life. It's just a matter of what is triggering it or how hard we're working to mask it and not even know it. You know, because like you said, you realize, oh, if I did certain behaviors, okay, that was kind of cringe. Don't let me do that. And so now you're masking a certain behavior that feels so natural to you because you're realizing people don't like that behavior. Right.
Yeah.
So for many of us, that ND was there our whole life. And so as we look back on these things, we're sitting there. Now we're starting to understand our interactions and connections we may have had with other people and how that was different or could be different now with a different set of glasses on. So interesting. Yeah. Okay.
And I think if I really consider like social skills and interactions, the way that I built a lot of social skills, if I really think on it, was from watching television. I think I figured out this is how people speak to each other based on what I saw on TV. And as a kid, I watched so much TV. So much. And I also was a latchkey kid for a good amount of years. And so the TV's kind of just there. What else you gonna do? And like I have siblings, but for the most part, I was the only kid in my house. So I had a lot of time to myself to watch these TV shows. I didn't sleep very well as a child, and I know my mother mentioned that some of it was I had like a lot of different medications I took for asthma and different things, and some of them can give you some insomnia. So I would be up. I'm talking 3, 4 a.m. up.
Wow.
Watching TV. There's no reason I knew everything that was happening on I Love Lucy. I'm 7 in the 90s. There's no reason for me to that show was in black and white. I didn't need to know everything that was going on All in the Family, but I did, okay? And I thought that stuff was hilarious. And
because
can't tell you, but I was not the intended audience of that show. I was not alive when the intended audience of that show was being formed. It wasn't quite for me, but that's the kind of stuff that was feeding me in learning how people interact. And then if you think about how I've said I developed this thing of I'll be the funny person. Part of that is I got tired of people laughing at me and me not understanding why. So if I'm purposely funny, at least I'm in on it.
Yes.
Also, like I became probably good at it because when I was like a preteen, early teens, I began to be extremely interested in stand-up comedy. So we talk about restricted interests, special interests. stand-up comedy is definitely one I got very, very into. So if you only consume stand-up comedy all the time, don't you think you might learn how to set up a good joke?
I hope so.
Probably,
At least
right?
with the old comedians that we watched back in the day, because these newer ones, I don't know. But
So, and I wasn't just like, haha, this is funny. I'm watching it just like, oh, the setup of that was cool. How did they get to the through line to that? Oh, so they told a story this way, and then okay, cool. If you watch that all the time and TV is forming how you communicate with other people verbally, that's what I'm doing. And so then if I talk to people now and if they feel like they have to tell me what they said was a joke because they're like, oh, maybe my response was serious. I'm like, no, baby, I understand jokes. Your joke just wasn't funny, but I understand jokes. You don't need to tell me.
oh my God, that was great. It's like, no, I understood it. It just wasn't funny.
And I don't have the ability.
The punchline was
your
awful.
setup was weak. What are we talking about? Like, how did you even get here? Like, you didn't build up enough for this. This isn't a good joke. You were just saying stuff to me. So, but because I don't really have the ability to do like a pity laugh, that's when we get into weird interactions. You're laughing and I'm so serious. I don't laugh.
I know you're serious, but I'm laughing at that because so many of us do that. And you're just like, yeah, I can't fake the funk. I'm sorry. I can't.
And I think the expectation is, hey, you do the pity laugh. You laugh to be polite. So if you didn't laugh to be polite, it must mean that you didn't know I was joking. And I'm like, no, I knew you were joking. But I didn't like the joke or it wasn't funny. So I'm just kind of here. And are you done with that joke? Okay. Back to what I was saying before you decided to interrupt me with this quote unquote joke.
And see, this is why, ladies, that I laugh all the time at Lex. And she's like, I'm so dead serious right now. And I'm like, I know you are. It's just, again, it's not what she said, it's how she's saying it. And it's the fact that she's so brutally honest. I shouldn't even say brutal because I don't think it's brutal. She's just so honest. And then you're just sitting there like, she has the gusto to say things sometimes that you wish you could say and you just don't. And I love that. I love that for her. And I love that's my friend. And I was also laughing at, quite honestly, that, well, because I know I'm always going to get the truth out of you. So that I never hesitate with that. I love my friends that are like that. But the other thing I was laughing at was she was like, yeah, because I was up at 3-4 o'clock in the morning and I could watch TV and I'm going, yeah, well, when I was a kid at your age staying up at 3-4 o'clock in the morning, the TV was off. It was snow. It was static. They told us, okay, Johnny Carson came on. He went off the air. The American flag is playing. The national anthem is played. And we are shutting down all transmission. And so you were kind of just stuck in the dark at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning because there was nothing on TV, not even on the off channels. It was like, nope, everybody go to bed. So I'm glad you had such epic shows because one of my favorite episodes, two of my favorite episodes of I Love Lucy is Stomping the Grapes, Vitamita Vegemin, and the chocolate. When they were in the chocolate.
You know something funny? You talking about a time when TV went off, when it just closed for the day? I know that that's a thing because of stand-up comedy. A comedian spoke about that one time in a bit, and I was like, oh, that's a thing that used to happen. All right.
Yeah, it's a thing that
TV used to turn off.
Yep. Right about midnight, maybe 1 o'clock. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would try my best to stay up 24 hours, and I couldn't because there was nothing to watch on TV but snow. And if you grew up, and then if you grew up watching some of the scary movies that I watched at that time, you knew snow on TV was not a good thing. So you turned the TV off. You were just like, nope, not doing it. To this day, I can't do it. But anyway, so I appreciate you kind of like explaining all of that and what your experience is like. You did talk about masking, and masking is a phrase that is used in the neurodivergent community so often because a lot of us do it and don't even realize we're doing it. Would you mind explaining a little bit about what it is and how or why we do it?
I think A simple way to explain it is suppressing or hiding whatever your symptoms are, your traits are that go along with your specific version of neurodivergence to feel more accepted. So me saying that I figured out by the feedback I got that the way I was communicating was not working, was not what they wanted, they didn't like it. I said, nope, not doing that. I will simply keep it to myself.
Right.
Whereas someone who doesn't mask will just go on probably repeating those phrases, having themselves a good time.
Yeah. And it's almost, it can be uncomfortable a lot of times because we're talking about, especially like if there's sensory things. And I realized recently that I will sometimes mask when I'm in sensory overload. Like, okay, the lights are too bright, then there's too much noise, or that's not the noise I want to hear. When I call it hyper tune into all the sounds, all the smells, all the everything's around me, and I will sit there and still push through it. It is extremely uncomfortable. And then and it's even more uncomfortable when you try to mention it to somebody, like, can you please stop doing X, Y, Z? And they're looking at you like you're always saying it, because that sound like really, really irritates me in a way I can't even explain to you. And so masking is when you just don't say anything, you endure it. You might try to redirect yourself in a different way, and that's not working. It's basically hiding who and what you are and what you're dealing with for somebody else's comfort.
And it's so funny you brought up sensory things, because there are so many like sensory like needs that I had growing up that for whatever reason just kind of, I didn't even notice it was a special thing, right? So when I talk about being a latchkey kid, a lot of times like my dad would work nights, so he would be going off to work probably right after I got home or like right before I got home, and then my mom wouldn't be home for a little bit. So I need some time in the dark, in the quiet, and some solitude because I've been overwhelmed for the whole day. But I didn't know I needed that. I just came home, didn't turn on any lights, laid down on the couch, might pick something on TV I want to watch, might take a nap, just might do anything else. And then my mama come home, why is it so dark in here? And turning on all the lights, just like, why you sitting in the dark? Don't do that. And I was just like, I was fine. It wasn't until recently I was like, oh, no wonder. And I was able to like get that kind of a reset that I needed. And it just worked out because I was coming home and having those few hours alone each day. It wasn't until I got to be an adult and maybe I had a roommate who I would come home and they're running around doing stuff. They making noise. They want to talk to me as soon as I get home. And I'm like, whoa, why are you doing any of this?
Yeah.
Why would you do this as soon as anyone gets in the house? What is wrong with you? Why are you talking? Why would you want to do this? I'm thinking that they're the weird one for wanting all of that. And then I come to realize, no, actually, I'm doing something that's actually not typical by needing it to be like pitch black and silent when I come in the house. Now, masking would just be, I hate this, but I'm just going to power through and pretend that I'm not bothered by this. Whereas communicating about, hey, listen, I actually need this when I come home from work. Can you just give me this little bit of time to do this? And I'm going to take the time for myself to go into my room, maybe in the quiet. To accommodate myself, as opposed to trying to power through and push through and to hide whatever I've got going on.
Yeah. It's funny you say that too, that like in your adult years, you realize more of that, because I'm thinking just in this moment right now, there are times where, you know, I used to work for a cruise line, and when we would have what they would call pre-inaugural sailings, which is when the new ship would come out, and we'd do all these events on board and have all these people coming through, press and travel agents and stuff. It was a lot of, I got to be on 24/7 type things. And then when I would come home, even if it was only a week, if it was a few days, one time I was on a ship almost an entire month. of different activities. And I came home, I was like, don't say the word ship, don't say the word water, don't say this, don't ask that. I would come home and I can remember I would not unpack my bags. I'd come home, come straight in the room, take off this bra, because we all got to do that, put on some comfy clothes, plop down on the bed in the dark, and just go to sleep. And I might sleep for days, because I'm realizing it wasn't just that I needed the recovery physically because it was so physically exhausting. Mentally and emotionally, I needed the recovery because I was so on and I couldn't be off. So that's also the masking part. And one important thing to note before we move on is that girls and women are definitely more likely to mask than boys. Boys are going to, when they are neurodivergent, they're going to act out their neurodivergence. They might be the ones that might talk back. They might do destructive things like breaking stuff or whatever. They're getting their feeling and their frustration of this is too much for me. They're getting it out, so to speak. Girls and women are going to hold it in. And we will get into this down the line as well, because this is an important part of our journey as women of color who are neurodivergent. Culturally, for many of us, we overlap culturally with, we are supposed to carry the load. We're supposed to be super women. We're not supposed to complain, all those things. So we'll talk about that because that's a much deeper conversation. So we'll talk about that another time, but that's another reason why women and women of every race, ethnicity, nationality, but especially those of us that are Black and brown, that is historically in our cultures where we carry that. So we mask way more than we should or we need to. Because there's appropriate times to mask, I think. There's appropriate times. But you decide where those boundaries are and when it's most appropriate.
Okay. Appropriate times to mask. That might be something to think about too, because I don't know if right off the back, if I feel like I agree with that sentence, I might want to tweak it a little bit.
Okay, how would you tweak it?
An appropriate time to self-regulate. I don't know if fully masking is what we're looking for, because that's still a lot of like suppression and not tending to the needs that you have. Whereas regulation might be, this is too much. So what kind of things do you need to do to help you through this situation that is overwhelming for whatever reason? Does that mean you need to take a break? Does that mean you need to leave the room? Does that mean you need to just ask somebody, can I turn the light down? Can I put on headphones? I'm wondering if maybe an appropriate time to mask is slightly different from what we're looking for.
Okay. So from my perspective, when I say an appropriate time to mask, I'm talking about, for instance, if you are at a gala event that your company is hosting, you can't exactly get away from the loud noise, this and that. You might be able to step out of a room for a minute, and maybe that ties into what you're talking about, to kind of self-regulate. But you're in a situation where you don't have much control over what you can do for you. And I don't know if that's necessarily true in every situation. There's times when you might be able to step outside of a meeting for a few minutes. There might be times where you can step outside of certain things, but there's also times when, let's say, if someone's working in a warehouse and they are responsible for driving the forklift and doing this and doing that, and what I mean by that is they're taking things down and moving things around, they may not have the time, or they may not be in a space that will allow them to go, okay, wait a minute, there's too much going on, there's too much noise, just give me 5 minutes to get myself together. Because some people may not understand and may not want to give that. So that's why I use that phrase, appropriate time to mask. But I definitely get what you're saying about making sure we're self-regulating, finding some way to self-regulate. So I think that'll be...
Yeah, we might have to dig into this later, because I feel like what you just described is a scenario where you should be supported in your workplace.
Oh, I agree.
Really, probably like federally mandated. It might be federally mandated in certain situations to do so.
Went to the law.
because like it might be something that there's already policies in place to help you out with that. Because I think what you're describing, a scenario where you might decide that you have to mask if you don't feel comfortable, I guess, requesting the accommodation that you need. So I guess I understand what you're saying in that sense. But yeah, I think just the phrasing inappropriate time to mask, I automatically feel like, no, it ain't.
And they say I'm the rebel in the bunch. No, but you're probably right. It might not be an appropriate time to mask, but it might be a time when we decide to mask. It might be a better way of putting that there will be times when we will make the decision to mask and endure the discomfort for whatever reasons until it is a situation where we can feel more comfortable to do whatever.
Yeah.
So,
look at me. Now I'm on semantics. Look at that.
Because you've been watching all them comedians breaking down. But you know what? What's interesting to me is if you talk to any of the really good comedians, that's exactly what they did. They studied other people, how they broke down their stories, the word choices they used, the body language, all of that stuff in order not only just to craft the joke or the proper setup, but what are the words that are going to draw on the audience? That's also used in marketing. That's used in sales. That's used in a variety of, so you are actually cultivating skills that you can use, not just in your day-to-day communication, but also in, your future job life, your career. That would be able, if you wanted to, that would be able to help you. I've seen your writing in the way that you communicate with people, like via email and everything. Very clean, very polished, very professional. And it does have a tone, whether you realize it has a tone or not, which is why I said today that you're doing better than I think that you're doing sometimes with some of the things that you still feel you have challenges with. I think you're doing really well, but I also know it was years of hard work to get there. Years of hard work. All right. So yeah, that was a good dive to start off talking about, the signs and symptoms and things that we might experience when we're neurodivergent, particularly on the autism spectrum. So on our next episode, we're going to talk about it from the ADHD perspective. And when you see some of the similarities and some of the differences, yeah. It's all of this is so mind-blowing to me. It's really interesting. So looking forward to getting into that, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for tuning in.
Bye.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. We'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions or topics you'd like for us to cover in our podcast, please don't hesitate to let us know. You can send us a message on our fan page at fanlist.com/BGBG Squirrel. That's fanlist.com/BGBG Squirrel.